Hello and welcome to another Innovation Explained video. For many, the term idea management is still pretty new. On the surface, it can seem like a very abstract thing. Everybody has ideas all the time, right? But in reality, it's actually a very tangible set of practices that can make a huge difference on the business and innovation outcomes of any organization. So, in today's video, we'll help you understand what the topic is all about and share some practical advice on how to get it right. But with that, let's get started. Now, first, we've got to define the term idea management. We like to define it as the systematic process of collecting, developing, evaluating, and prioritizing ideas and insights to drive tangible outcomes for your organization. That's obviously a bit of a mouthful, but the main idea is pretty simple. You just take a systematic approach to managing the collective information that people have about your organization and products, which in practice manifests itself as ideas. That covers essentially all kinds of ideas that may occur within the organization, from the wild and ambitious new business ideas all the way to solving problems in your current processes to improving employee well-being, and so on. Now, let's quickly take a step back and put that in the context of innovation management at large. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about innovation management, we've got another video on that specifically. Anyway, idea management is just one part of the larger innovation management landscape, but it's what essentially constitutes your innovation pipeline or funnel, whichever phrase you'd like to use. Where exactly it begins and ends is a bit of a line in sand, but the key to understand here is that idea management is a process where ideas come in from one end, and if successful, you get innovations out from the other end. And that naturally means that it's a pretty important part of the whole innovation landscape. With that, let's next cover why idea management matters. And the short answer is that because companies are only able to implement a small number of all the ideas they have, and because only a portion of those will lead to truly great results. Whatever you can do to improve those ratios will obviously make a huge difference for the overall performance of the organization. But a systematic approach to idea management can also lead to a number of softer but very important benefits. These are things like improved transparency, sharing of information, and more innovative culture across the organization. Having said that, let's next cover some of the most common challenges related to idea management. Let's first discuss the elephant in the room. Ideas are everywhere. Everyone has them all the time, and to be clear, most of those ideas are actually pretty bad. Even for truly great innovators in some of the best and most supportive environments in the world, a majority of their ideas fail. So the real challenge in idea management isn't about getting more ideas. It's partly about getting better ideas, but primarily about filtering out the wheat from the chaff and then turning that into bread. In other words, finding the best ideas and turning those into something tangible that creates real value. Now, one of the key challenges in achieving that is that the decision makers in many large organizations are often pretty far removed from the sources of the best ideas, and sometimes even the realities in the front lines of an organization. This can obviously lead to a lot of challenges in running the business, but perhaps most notably if you're sitting in your figurative ivory tower and don't intimately understand the processes and experiences that frontline employees and customers go through. Odds are many of the best ideas will never get to you. Plus, even if they do, it can be exceedingly difficult to know what is a good idea and what isn't. In fact, as I recently joined the board of a business that I haven't personally operated in, I really realized how big of a handicap this can actually be for a leader. A good leader will of course find ways to work around this by empowering, supporting, and challenging others instead of trying to make all the decisions themselves. And of course, by introducing systematic practices for collecting and managing those ideas and making decisions about them. Now, part of what can make the previous challenge worse is that the best ideas often come from people that aren't great at selling their ideas. Everyone knows these people. Often they can be introverted engineers that have brilliant ideas, but because they're not a great presenter, no one seems to believe in or understand their ideas. And everybody also knows those charismatic storytellers. They can be MBAs or consultants whose ideas leadership always seems to pick up, even in situations where most know the specific idea to be terrible. Now, the moral of the story here isn't to dismiss these great storytellers or even to improve your own presentation skills, even if that definitely helps. But it is instead that an organization should create systems that value ideas objectively and on their merits, not based on who presents them or how good of a job they do at that. This is, for example, why Amazon uses written memos instead of oral and visual presentations to discuss any meaningful development. Now, another key challenge in idea management is separating the idea from the problem it's trying to solve. In many cultures, we are taught to be positive and solution-centric. Here's how we could make this better. Don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. While these approaches can certainly have their benefits, the approach isn't without its downsides too. We often spot a very important problem and then come up with a pretty crappy idea to try to solve that. What then happens is the people who hear the idea naturally start evaluating the idea itself and not the problem it's trying to solve. Now, this is fundamentally a very challenging problem to solve, but good idea management practices can help with this too, since once you start noticing plenty of ideas around a specific theme from different people, it quickly becomes obvious that you need to take a closer look at that specific topic. Ideation is sometimes not seen as a priority by management, often accompanied by a statement like, "We already have all the ideas we need, now we just need to execute on our strategic goals." And often they're right. A large portion of ideation activities in many organizations are focused on nice-to-have fringe issues, which then means that whatever comes out of it doesn't really move the needle for the organization. That is why ideation should always be a systematic effort focused on the overall strategic goals of your organization. Sure, it's good to keep an eye on those wild ideas and moonshots, but the real power of idea management comes from harnessing the entire organization to collectively and systematically work towards your strategic goals. Do that, and idea management actually becomes a critical tool for strategic execution. Now, the final point here is very simple but critical to understand. You should always remember that an idea isn't worth anything unless it's implemented and properly executed upon. So one of the keys to successful idea management is to create structures that reserve enough of the right resources and capabilities for the implementation across the entire organization, and to do it in a way that can respond to changing situations and needs quickly. In other words, without having to wait for next year's budget. Without these systematic processes in place, you're essentially relying on individuals to put in heroic efforts to either secure the needed resources somehow or to find ways to implement the idea with whatever is available. And that obviously isn't a very sustainable or scalable way to manage innovation. By now, it should be pretty obvious what the point of idea management is. As mentioned, it's just a systematic and focused way to approach turning ideas into something that creates value. The key practice in all of this is figuring out how to shape your idea management process or processes. Before we look at that, it's however important to understand that there are two main philosophical approaches to idea management. This is important to understand because it determines what your processes need to look like, what resources you'll need, and even which tools you should use. So the two dimensions that we need to take a look at here are the level of centralization and whether the efforts are a series of limited time campaigns or something more continuous by nature. While there's some variation here, typically campaigns are organized centrally and continuous processes will need to be decentralized. Campaigns take a lot of work to pull off well and require some specialized organizational skills, which is why they work best as centralized efforts. Continuous processes, on the other hand, work best as a decentralized effort because there, a key part is to strive for a fast pace of innovation, which is almost impossible to achieve when run centrally at any large organization. Now, many organizations want to kick off their efforts with a centralized one-off campaign. For example, it could be a pure idea challenge around a timely topic or more of a Shark Tank-like process looking for new ideas and teams to build them. They are great for getting quick results and for building initial momentum for your innovation efforts. But while this approach certainly has these clear benefits and can be useful in certain situations, we generally advise our clients to approach these as the exception and not the norm. The problem with campaigns is that sustaining momentum with these one-off campaigns is just incredibly laborious and doesn't scale well. Also, people might start to get innovation fatigue, which quickly leads to lower engagement and a drop in results. Because these are also separate from the business units, there will be many challenges in implementing and adapting the ideas. So what we advocate most to go for is a more decentralized and continuous approach to idea management. With this approach, each team, product, or business unit, it could even be a strategic goal, whatever you want to focus on, will have their own idea management process. Here, the processes are typically run so that the same unit that makes the decisions also implements the ideas. This will allow you to engage much more people in innovation across the organization and to do so in a much more sustainable way. And because decisions get made and implemented faster and you can work on many more innovations in parallel, you can achieve a dramatically higher pace of innovation and in turn business results. These processes can range from simple continuous improvement processes within existing businesses to an innovation unit looking for new business opportunities and anything in between. Now, in practice, this is of course not a black and white either or question. Every large company needs a mixture of different processes for different purposes. So in reality, most organizations have some kind of a hybrid approach to idea management. You may have some centrally run processes or campaigns that span the entire organization, but also plenty of other processes run by managers and innovators across the organization. In fact, top performing innovators often have hundreds of such processes going on simultaneously. If we then move on to the process itself, at a high level, most of them actually look pretty similar. You generate and collect ideas, then they're discussed, refined, and evaluated. The best ones are then taken to either be directly implemented, or if there's still a lot of uncertainty, for further testing, validation, and iteration before they're ready for implementation. However, the devil is actually in the details. This is a massive topic on its own, but here's an example to provide some perspective. If an idea requires massive investment, you obviously want solid governance processes to be in place for committing funds to such a project, and ideally you should break this down into a series of smaller phases instead of committing all the funds up front. However, if you try to force the same process for smaller and more straightforward decisions, nothing will likely get made, and even if it would, progress will be slow and the overhead massive. Still, not every incremental idea is worth doing either, and those should be evaluated, prioritized, and validated too. It's just that in many cases, it could be one person doing most of the work and the decisions instead of a venture board or other governance body nominating project teams. Now, each of the phases in this process is again a pretty big topic on its own, so we won't be covering these in detail here, but we'll leave links in the description to materials where you can learn more about each of them. Before we wrap up, we'll share a few of the most important considerations for getting idea management right in practice. This is already a pretty extensive video, so we'll keep this in rapid fire format. The first and most important one is that the way in which you frame the process and ask for ideas matters a lot. It's pretty simple really. If you just ask for random ideas, you'll get random ideas, most of which won't be very good. However, ask for ideas that help you achieve a certain tangible strategic goal, and you'll likely get plenty of ideas that really move the needle for your organization. Our second big piece of advice is to embed idea management in your daily processes and ways of working. An important consideration here is how you measure idea management, which, by the way, will be the topic of our next video. Anyway, this deep integration solves a couple of big problems. First, it turns systematic idea management into a habit which helps you transform the culture of your organization and make the effort sustainable. And second of all, it forces you to also plan for the implementation, which again is where the value will be realized. With just a bunch of separate initiatives or challenges, it's really hard to try to get enough resources to implement even a fraction of the ideas you receive. And finally, it's important to understand that even if things look quite simple on the surface, idea management can actually be surprisingly complex. There are typically many different stakeholders and interest groups, as you can see from this illustration, which represents just one simple centralized process. So you should try to simplify and streamline that as much as possible for the ideators and innovators specifically, so that they don't need to worry about navigating the complexity. Now, the point is that you need to make sure to clarify the roles so that everybody understands what is expected of them, and to clarify the decision-making process. Who makes the decisions and what is the criteria? This transparency and consistency will help improve the quality of your outcomes a lot. It's about time to wrap up for today, but before you go, I just wanted to give you a quick reminder about the importance of having the right tools too. An idea management software like Viima won't obviously do all of what we've discussed for you, but it can still be an essential tool in doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you so that you can actually focus on what matters most and empower people across your organization to make more innovation happen. We're obviously a bit biased on the matter, but fortunately you don't just have to take our word for it, because the basic plan of our software is free for an unlimited number of users, so consider giving it a try. Anyway, that concludes our session for today. If you have any questions, please leave those for us in the comments below. And remember to subscribe to stay up to date on our future innovation content. We'll see you again in the next one.